this morning I want to talk about sustainability. After Steve Jobs passed away, there were a lot of people having conversations that went like this: what was Steve Jobs' greatest invention? And some people said it was the Mac or even the Apple II. Some said it was the iPod and the idea of streamable content. Some said it was the iPhone or the iPad. My thinking was that Steve Jobs' greatest invention was the Apple company, because he built a company that I believe will sustain and continue to provide value to the marketplace for generations to come, because he built the processes into the company to look for and execute innovation. And I think the latest wave of product reveals supports that. I used to say, time would tell, but I think we now see CarPlay. Most of the major car manufacturers have signed on to provide Apple CarPlay as the interface in the dashboard of your car. Apple Watch, Apple Pay, whether they pay me for my idea or not, I don't know, but these are things that I think are going to have a profound effect on our country and on our world. So we've been talking about sustainability of our oceans and our drinking water, sustainability of our products that we make, sustainability of our air, and these are great things to talk about and great innovations that we're looking at yesterday, and we'll look at more today. But behind those, for those to really make a lasting difference, you're going to have a different kind of sustainability, and that's a sustainable company. A company that's built not just for short-term gain, but to provide long-term value. A company that understands that they're not here to serve just a few shareholders, but to serve an ecosystem of stakeholders who depend on that company to be a long-term value to their communities. One example, I worked on a book called Nanovation that was a 3-year case study of a company in India called Tata. And just to be brief, Tata was founded during the British Raj. They're about 150 years old. And they were basically industrial Gandhis. They understood, after they'd sort of got their feet on the ground and were starting off in the textile business, they understood that until India had an industrial base, they would not be able to thrive as an independent country. So they built the first textile mills in India, the first hydroelectric power, the first steel mills. They provided rails for the Indian railway. They built trucks. They built cars. Today, the group owns about 100 companies. They earn about $6 billion a year in profit. And this is where it gets interesting. 60% of the stock of the company, although it's publicly traded, but 60% of the stock is owned by 2 trusts that were founded in 1909 by the sons of the founder. The chairman of Tata Group, his day job is to make sure that they continue to serve the ecosystem of India and South Asia with great products so that they can continue to earn those $6 or $7 billion a year. And then his evening job is to go over and be the chairman of these 2 trusts and spend their share of that profit on schools and hospitals and the community. We have companies like that in America. You're going to hear from one of them today. UPS, Hershey, Sherwin-Williams, the Ford Motor Company. These are companies that understand that they are part of an ecosystem, and for their responsibility to last for hundreds of years, they've got to provide that sustainable long-term value to the country, to the community, to all the people that they serve. So I said we were going to hear from a company like that. Wallenius Wilhelmsen Logistics is the joining together of 2 companies, one of which is 85 years old, the other is 150 years old, that have understood the value of providing long-term value to the world. That's part of the reason why they've been one of the founding partners here of the Ocean Exchange. Ray Fitzgerald is the vice chairman of the board of Ocean Exchange, and the president of WWL US, has had a long-term career in the shipping industry and logistics industry. And interesting link, a few years ago, Tata Motors bought Jaguar Land Rover out of bankruptcy from Ford, turned it around into one of the most successful car companies in the world, and every Jaguar, every Land Rover that comes into the United States is brought here by WWL, prepped here, completely set up to be delivered to you next time you buy your next Land Rover by WWL. So please welcome Ray Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Dane. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very excited to be here to kick off the second full day of the Ocean Exchange. From a sponsor's perspective, yesterday was just terrific. As the day unfolded and I mingled about the room, I couldn't help but be swept up and motivated by the energy and the enthusiasm of the different discussions. And that energy and the enthusiasm is the reason why WWL participates and takes a leadership role in the Ocean Exchange. So thank you for that. So my objectives over the next couple of minutes are three. First, I will give you a snapshot of WWL. Secondly, I'll introduce to you some challenges that we see on the regulatory front, which is quite a different approach than I took last year, for those of you who are here, where I outlined some of the initiatives that WWL is working on to lessen its environmental footprint. And then lastly, I'll introduce you to a key customer partner of ours, Mr. Greg Jansen from Caterpillar, who will come up and talk about why sustainability is important for Caterpillar. And as you listen to Greg, you'll understand that sustainability and Caterpillar is progressing world progress in a way that other large manufacturers don't quite do that. Okay? So before I delve into that agenda, I'll take the first slide. Oh, back one. A year ago, I talked about an initiative where we had a vision of an eco-friendly marine terminal. And right about this time last year, we were putting a bid in for that terminal. And I'm happy to say that we've been awarded that terminal by the government of Australia. So we are in the process of developing, and in the future we will manage a terminal that generates its own power and energy, completely recycles all of its waste, and to the extent possible under the technology today, mitigates its emissions from its business activities there. We had this vision to be complete by 2030, and with this award, WWL will now realize its vision more than 10 years ahead of time. So very happy to report that, and we'll give you further updates on that in the years to come. Okay, who is WWL? Well, yesterday we heard about Mr. Rolls and Mr. Royce. Ours is a story about Mr. Wallenius and Mr. Williamson. So Wallenius was founded in 1934. Williamson was founded in 1861, and they are both Scandinavian shipping companies. Wallenius is based in Stockholm, Sweden. Williamson is based in Oslo, Norway. In 1999, recognizing the globalization of businesses, they combined their operating companies to form Wallenius Wilhelmsen Logistics. And today we are part of a group that moves automobiles, heavy equipment, and project cargoes around the planet. And that market share that we have as a group is about 30% worldwide. So that makes us the largest logistics and transportation company that most of you have never heard of. Okay? Okay, so what do we do exactly? We'll take outbound logistics cargo coming out of the factory, whether it's an automobile, whether it's a Caterpillar tractor, or whether it's a project from Siemens or General Electric or Boeing. We will move that from the factory through an assortment of conveyances in the supply chain, whether that be truck, rail, barge. We will take it on the deep sea, we will do that in reverse, and we will get it to its ultimate destination. We manage supply chain activity across the board from factory to dealer for some customers, and we only do segments of it for other customers. It's really an a la carte menu. So our group, we have 60 vessels that trade in 12 routes around the world, covering 6 continents, all but Antarctica. Interestingly, we move 4.3 million annual movements through that network, but more on land than we do on ocean. Our land-based business is approaching about $1 billion a year, and we're really starting to see that the activity that we provide in terms of value in the logistics chain for our customers is becoming more and more important with each passing year. Case in point, technical services that we do for automobiles and vehicles. We move 6 million vehicles worldwide through our processing center. So when a vehicle comes out of a factory and it gets to a destination market and there are idiosyncrasies in that destination market that need to be catered to, we can manage that at a quality level and at a specification level for the OEM in a way that others can't do that. 4 million of those vehicles alone go through the North American network that we have in Canada, the US, and Mexico. Then in addition to that, we started to invest about 15 years ago in marine terminals. If you consider what a marine terminal is, it's a bottleneck between our ocean activity and our land-based activity. So what had happened in the mid-90s as the world's economy really started to heat up in a big way, we had strategic locations, terminals that we depended on that came to us and said, we love you, but we love the container carriers more. Because for that footprint of land that we have currently a BMW or a Caterpillar tractor sitting on, we can go to a container carrier and charge him or her that same cost 6 times stacking that unit. Can't stack a BMW, and you certainly can't stack a Caterpillar unit. So we recognized that we needed to make some strategic investments in key areas of the world to control our own destiny and become more efficient in the handoff between the ocean and the land-based activity. Hence our terminal investments, and that's what the terminal in Melbourne, Australia represents, and that will be number 13. 4 million units go through that terminal operation each year. All right, so lastly on who WWL is, this is a snapshot of 35 of our customers. By no stretch a complete list, but there are some pretty good names up there that you'll recognize. Okay, so how is our business looking forward? We think it's pretty good. The fundamental drivers are very, very positive. There's continued global growth. That's growth in nations. That's growth in populations. That's growth in economies, which points to the middle column. We heard the young lady from Rolls-Royce yesterday talk about 2 billion people in the middle class today. In the next 15 years, by 2030, 3 billion more will enter. So 15 years from now, the middle class will be 5 billion people. That's more cars sold, that's more equipment needed for infrastructure and development for the energy needs of a growing population. Now, that's good for our business, but in terms of the ocean exchange, everything I just said has a flip side to it. And if you take a look at this slide now, that leaves a pretty big global footprint. So 50-something years ago, not that long ago, when I was born, there were 3 billion people on the planet. Today there are 7, and by the time we get to 2050, just 90 years later, there will be nearly 10 billion people on the planet. That's going to create an enormity of challenges for all of us to deal with. Now, I can sit here and explain to you all of the dimensions of the challenges that we face relative to everything I just highlighted on this slide, but we don't have time for that. So I'll focus on one thing, and that's emissions. And specifically, I'd like to talk about sulfur emissions. Now, sulfur emissions cause respiratory challenges, they cause cardiac issues, and they're the leading cause of acid rain. And the sulfur emissions that come into the air right now, 72% of that come from the coal factories. Another 20% come from other industrial processes. And the remaining 7% come from the making of steel, the smelting of metals, transportation-related issues, trains, trucks, vessels like WWLs, and off-road equipment. So this is a big, big issue. The ECAs, environmental control areas that we heard about yesterday from the young lady from Rolls-Royce. If you're operating in an ECA within 200 miles of either coast of North America or throughout Northern Europe, your vessels cannot burn fuel that have a sulfur content of more than 1%. In about 85 days from now, on January 1st, that number goes down to 0.1%. Compare that to the global limits, where you can burn up to 3.5% sulfur content in your fuel. Just 3 short years ago, that number was 4.5%. So it's coming down. In 5 years from now, that number will come down to 0.5%. So there's dramatic change coming on the regulatory front for sulfur emissions. And WWO welcomes that. We embrace that. We think this is a good thing. This regulation is needed for all the reasons that I've spelled out thus far. So how are we approaching this? There's really 4 things that we're looking at. First, starting at your 9 o'clock on the orange box, we're burning low sulfur fuel where we can. In areas where we enter the ecozone, we will burn diesel fuel, the top green, which has a very low sulfur content. There's a premium in doing that, but that's something that we do, and we do it willingly. I talked about the global average on the last slide being 3.5%. For more than 15 years now, WWL has self-imposed a maximum limit of 1.5% in the sulfur it burns worldwide. So we've been making a multi-million-dollar investment in a year just as part of our own values and environmental commitment. We also look at some other energy sources that are out there. Some are ready for prime time, most are not. One is liquid natural gas, and there are some vessels under construction today that will burn LNG. And then there are other opportunities to clean the emissions, and that is the scrubber that I talked about last year, exhaust gas cleaning systems. In essence, what it does is it takes the exhaust from our vessels, passes it through a liquid solution that takes out the sulfur and the NOx. The challenge with that is it's pretty expensive, and to retrofit a group fleet of more than 160 vessels is a very, very time-consuming and expensive proposition. So there isn't one solution, as the bullet on the right says. We'll need multiple solutions as we move forward, and we're going to count on technology and ideas that come from venues like this to do what we need to accomplish moving forward. So when our customers ask us, what's the plan? The emission regulations are changing. We have a multi-plan. Now, inside the ecozones, we change away from the bunker heavy fuel oil, and we'll start to burn marine diesel oil. Medium term, we can install more scrubbers. We've got new buildings coming up, new buildings meaning developing vessels in the yards today. We're building vessels with the scrubbers in there, but that's not the only solution. And then going forward, we're going to have to look at new approaches. For instance, liquid natural gas. Then, ultimately, we will move towards our vision of a zero-emissions vessel. And this is the Oracel vessel, which is named after the award that we'll give out tonight. The Oracel vessel is a zero-emissions vessel that is powered entirely by the wind, by the sun, and by wave dynamics. So this is the ultimate of where we want to be in terms of our vessel profile. So all of these things that I talked about on the last slide and this vision out there on the horizon is what motivates WWL to achieve its zero emissions goal. Okay, so I talked about the regulatory front. The regulatory front is not the challenge. Cost and enforcement of the regulations is really the challenge. So if you start with the costs, if we burn marine diesel in the ecozones, that's about 50% more costly than the heavy fuel oil that we burn around the rest of the world. So there's a price premium there. But you know what? That's just the price of doing business. So we're okay with that. If you look at the consumption per day and then the added cost per day, depending on the vessel, the efficiency of that vessel, we can be anywhere between $15,000 and $20,000 a day, times WWL's 60 ships, times the 160 ships in the group fleet. It starts to become an expensive proposition where we will be spending tens of millions of dollars a year on the changes. But again, for the 4th or 5th time in this presentation, that's something that we do willingly and we embrace it. The challenge for us is the enforcement. There is not sufficient enforcement out there right now. The European Commission analysis in the ecozone says only 1 in 1,000 vessels are inspected. And those that are caught burning fuel above the sulfur minimum, they've been fined anywhere between 300 euros and 85,000 euros. So if you think about it, I said this will cost me, just as an operator, tens of millions of dollars a year. If the fines out there are 300 euros to 85,000 euros, There's something lopsided about that equation. So the weak enforcement in Europe is an issue. The enforcement is better in North America, but it's not sufficient. But worldwide, when we get to 2020 and we drop that global average from 3.5% to 0.5%, we're going to have a dramatic enforcement challenge. Funding, technology, jurisdictional issues, there are lots of challenges inside of that enforcement that I won't get into right now. But looking at this chart, as the regulatory course increase, and I hate to read the bullet, enforcement more than regulation becomes the driver of compliance. So if that red line going across is the limit of enforcement that we face and the cost is up there, where that red question mark is, it really forces some companies to ponder decisions that they shouldn't have to even think about. If enforcement is weak and compliance costs are high, that temptation is out there. And if you're only going to be fined a couple of €100 and the cost of compliance is several million per year, we have a challenge. All right, so what we're looking for is a level playing field. But right now, unless enforcement increases, we have an uneven playing field, as the picture indicates here. So, in essence, bad behavior is rewarded, and responsible behavior is it says distorted, but accepted. And we can't have that. So, negative environmental consequences for all. So, this isn't going to fix itself, and as I said a moment ago, it's really only going to get stronger as we approach 2020. So, we've all heard the old adage that you can't fight City Hall alone, and all due respect if anyone from the mayor's office is still here, but we see that there are strength in numbers. So based on discussions that we had in this forum last year and input from partners like Bill Shira at Gulfstream and our own Jane Cohen, who flew in from Texas, our man Roger Strevens came up with a concept that we call the Trident Alliance. And it's really a strength in numbers concept, where it's a single shipping network where we take like-minded operators and we bring them together and we bring a concerted effort towards government, towards industry, and towards regional activity, whatever the bodies may be. And it's really proven to be quite successful. It's a strong message on the environment, and there are now 17 leading companies involved with this, and very quickly approaching nearly 10% of the fuel burned worldwide. So we're starting to get some critical mass with this Trident Alliance. And the beautiful thing about this slide is it's about 3 weeks old. And as of yesterday, there are now more than 20 major carriers involved in this, and the level of fuel burned in our segment of the industry is now well beyond the 10% number that's reflected here. So it's really quite a good thing. Now there's a breakout group this afternoon at 3:30, which some of you have been invited to. And for others who think they may be able to make a contribution to the discussion around how do we make the Trident Alliance stronger and more powerful, or take a different approach, I would encourage you to reach out to our own Roger Strevens before the lunchtime, or at the lunchtime hour, to see if we can work into that. Okay? So, as I wind down and get ready to introduce Greg, I will say that back to the growth in populations, nations, the footprint of all of our industries that I spoke of earlier in the presentation, we've got a wide assortment of challenges, and it's really going to take all hands on deck to make improvement a reality. So we're going to count on you, your input, and your good ideas. And one of the values that WWL has is teaming and collaboration. That's something that we encourage strongly and drive within our own culture. It's something that we encourage and drive within the customer partnerships that we have with those companies that I showed on the earlier slide. And it's something that I would encourage and drive here in this room. We need you to help us achieve our ultimate goals, and the benefit will help everyone. So when I was a young man, my father said to me, "Ray, you're going to meet lots of people in life that talk the talk. That's not enough. You want to be someone who walks the talk, and you want to associate with people like that." That association of people walking the talk is why WWL actively involves itself in the Ocean Exchange, and I thank you for your commitment to that effort. Thank you very much.
I want to start by just talking a little bit about history and try to give you a sense of how it's led us to where we are today in sustainability. Years ago, some of you may know this, in the 70s and 80s, many manufacturers were trying to implement tools, new tools, techniques to improve on throughput and cycle time. And so lean manufacturing became kind of a buzzword and a major initiative through many manufacturing companies all over the world. But it really didn't focus on variability. So sometime after that, you heard about Six Sigma. And Six Sigma not only drove process variability and improved on it, made it more sustainable, but also addressed quality concerns. So over the years, as time goes by, you're seeing a kind of a blend of both and what we call Lean Six Sigma. And it's really gone beyond manufacturing. In many ways, it's gone into segments of the service industry, support industry. It's just not typically just a manufacturing tool. What's become critical to the success of these techniques is teaming. We found that the teaming approach was best suited for defining, measuring, analyzing, then eventually coming up with improvements for complex and simple problems, and then being able to sustain them, if not continually improve them over time. So the application of a philosophy of continuous improvement followed. And then shortly, what I'm going to do is try to discuss how this teaming approach has helped us solve simple as well as very complex sustainability challenges at Gulfstream. So last year, some of you heard me talk about sustainability at Gulfstream, but on a broader scale, how it applied to the industry that we belong to, which is general aviation. So we have some aspirational goals. I shared this with some of you who were here last year to achieve a number of goals. One is become carbon neutral by 2020. Secondly, to increase fuel efficiency annually by 1.5% to 2% through 2020. And then also to reduce CO2 emissions by 50% by 2050. These are fairly aggressive goals, by the way, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And they're based on 4 pillars that you see here. One is improved technology. The other is improved infrastructure, use of alternative fuels, and then also market-based measures. So this kind of graphically shows you what our roadmap is and the significance of each one of those particular pillars. So this kind of demonstrates how and when our industry will reach these goals and where the predominant emphasis will reside. So just take technology improvements as an example, and you're going to see them primarily in airframe design, aeronautics, as well as engine research. And they'll account for about 45% of the goal that we want to reach in 2050. Infrastructure changes will be centered primarily on air traffic management and procedural modernization. For those of you who fly commercially, or even if you fly in a business jet, you'll notice sometimes when you're in the final approach to an airport, it takes a little bit longer than what you thought it would. You're either circling or you're slowing down. There's a number of the things that occur in the air traffic control management system that cause some inefficiencies. Think of what's going on while you're doing that. You're burning more fuel, and you're emitting more carbon. So what we can do in terms of the infrastructure within the air traffic control management system, and the FAA has taken on that challenge, the better off we're going to be. Those account for about 8% of the goal. Then there's alternative and preferably reusable fuels, and they'll make up about 40% of the goal. Last year when I came up here, I mentioned that at one point we took some of our airplanes and we mixed the fuel, the jet fuel, 50% jet fuel and 50% reusable energy, which was from a product, a weed called camelina. Now that sounds pretty easy. That's a great solution. Think of the infrastructure challenge that's going to result if we're going to use biofuels or reusable fuels like that for all of aviation. It's pretty substantial. So this is going to require a kind of a mix between a kerosene mixed fuel to one that's more biofuel generated. And then there's market-based changes, and they'll likely focus on carbon offset. And these constitute probably the smallest changes involving CO2. All right. On the ground at Gulfstream, we remain committed as I think you'll see as I go through these slides, with sustainability and making improvements in all aspects of our business. And one of the ways we do this, similar to what we did with Six Sigma or Lean Six Sigma, is to involve our employees, and that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. So we value integrity. It's one of our key values. It means doing the right thing at all times. And so we believe our employees embody that value because we empower them to act with the utmost of integrity all the time. And it's also a core of our sustainability program. So in other words, do the right thing from a sustainability standpoint means conserving our resources for the use by other generations. And so protecting our employees and our communities is very important to us, and then to continue to improve and innovate sustainability programs to ensure positive environmental impacts is very important as well. So in order to improve and innovate our sustainability programs, we look to our greatest resource, which is our employees, and we establish what we refer to as green teams. And these are all across our Gulfstream sites and our business units. And we originally charged these teams with addressing infrastructure and operational sustainability through 4 focus areas: energy, solid waste, hazardous waste, and water consumption. And then we did something just recently that we're very proud of. We created what we refer to as Green Team Bootcamp programs. And we brought green to the company by training employees throughout our network, which includes Mexicali, Mexico, Luton, England, and then all our sites here in the United States. The boot camps focus on environmental issues which affect our company. And after the boot camps, the green teams work with their colleagues and their leadership to make environmental improvements to facilities and operations. And we now have 24 of those teams, about 500 employees participating in all of those teams. We also, for the first time this year, started what we refer to as a Sustainability Summit. And these are cross-functional groups that collaborate with like teams at other sites. So this past summer, the green teams had an opportunity to come and meet here in Savannah, Georgia at this summit. We had representatives from all of our sites here to share their successes and exchange ideas over a two-day period. This is so critical to innovation and the sharing of innovation when you can get people who probably never even see each other through their careers, maybe have an opportunity from time to time to talk on the phone, but to be able to sit next to them, to exchange ideas and best practices, and take it from there is extremely important to us. So one of the great successes of the Sustainability Summit is that green teams are establishing best practices, which they adopt to eliminate the need for each site to do their own research that another site has already implemented. So it accelerates the process dramatically because they're not reinventing the wheel, quite frankly. We have an installation team, an interior installation team. These are the people that install all the fancy furniture in our airplanes. And they had an initiative to try to reduce the amount of compressed air that they use. And compressed air uses a lot of electricity. It's probably one of the most inefficient uses of electricity for what it generates in terms of compressed air. And they were able to find a way to decrease it substantially. Simple things like finding leaks on hoses or connectors were helpful. They could share that with some of the other sites so they could do the same thing. And that's exactly what they did. One of the other things that we've been doing is that we've looking at also the use of LED lighting. And so the installation of LED lighting has resulted in about a 40% reduction in energy usage in our Luton facility in England. So you can get a sense of what that's occurring by just making that one simple change. Also, we've seen the same effect at our Dallas site, Dallas, Texas. The new sales and design center that we have there was outfitted entirely with LED lighting. And since that time, Dallas has been working to retrofit fluorescent light fixtures with high-efficiency lamps, further reducing the energy use. If you've ever been to Baja California, in the north of Baja California, in the desert area, it gets very hot. But it's also a source of energy. And our Mexicali facility had a parking lot. You can see the graphic below. And they took that parking lot and they converted it into a solar panel garage. And so those are solar panels that you see there that help conserve energy at our facility and also allow for shade for our employees when they park in that particular parking lot. Here's another example. Our boilers at our Appleton, Wisconsin facility, it's a place that gets very cold in the wintertime. They were upgraded, resulting in an estimated annual savings of 2 million billions of BTU and 100 metric tons of CO2 annually. That's a significant reduction based on what they've done. And get this, our Long Beach facility does not provide any waste to the landfills. What it does is it takes those and does a single stream process with a particular company that we deal with. And so the waste that we used to send to landfills is now burnt for energy usage. And we're going to try to use that same technology and that same capability in some of our other sites. So these are just a few of the ongoing examples of what our green teams accomplish. And it's important to note that these teams are addressing energy, waste, and water reduction as the company grows and expands. And there's been a substantial amount of expansion, especially here in Savannah, since 2006. But since 2010, when we first established these green teams, and when our first facility master plan expansion was completed, Gulfstream's facility in Georgia have increased by over 900,000 square feet of facilities and by almost a little bit over 4,000 employees. We've added new facilities in Westfield, Massachusetts, and London, England. But even with all that expansion, the company has gone through, over the last few years, energy consumption and solid waste have decreased per person, and you can see on the graphics here. Water consumption, that's still a challenge for us. As we've expanded, quite frankly, we've not done quite as well by water consumption per employee, but we have some ideas and some things we can do to be able to improve in that area as well. So substantial improvement as we expand, and many of those buildings I'm talking about are LEED certified, which also helps us reduce our footprint, our carbon footprint, as a result of the designs that we're making in our new facilities. Now, in terms of solid and hazardous waste recycling, we've established a number of best practices. We've raised awareness. You can see on the left graphic how we've done on solid waste. We're doing much more recycling of solid waste. Then on the right side, the recycling we're doing on hazardous waste. So again, a lot of focus on the environment, a lot of focus on what we do daily and how we can improve it. So, just in conclusion, accelerating sustainability at Gulfstream, especially amid all the substantial growth we have been fortunate enough to experience, we've recognized early on in the journey that our employees are the drivers of our sustainability success. I was able to attend the Sustainability Summit, gave a little bit of a speech during that period of time and talked to a number of the employees around the country and also in Mexicali, Mexico, and got a sense of their excitement level. And the excitement level was very high. So we're going to grow this capability. We're going to use our people more and more as we challenge ourselves to even be better citizens, good citizens of the environment. So that's one of the reasons why we came to Ocean Exchange. Dane mentioned that we were one of the first sponsors here of the Ocean Exchange. We created the Navigator Award. We sponsor that yearly. This is the 4th year in a row that we've done that. We're excited about the solutions that come up. We love the award ceremony, so tomorrow night we're going to be able to provide to some lucky winner the Navigator Award, and it's because of what you do. We're basically generalists at this summit. We come here to this exchange because we're bullish on sustainability. We're not looking for one particular solution for one part of our industry. We're more interested in the general goal of sustainability across the world. So I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention. I may have time for a few questions if you had so, and then I'm going to introduce somebody very special to come up right after me. Thank you very much.